Hi, and welcome to our webcast for January 20, 2017. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
My name is Christian Aubry, and this is Amy Hasbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disabilities. Today's topics: nearly 750 euthanasia in Canada in 2016. Second subject, what does the inauguration of a new government in US mean for the struggle against assisted suicide and euthanasia? Third one, Mary Kills People, the premiere January 25 on global TV. And this is not a publicity.
Yeah.
And the last one, the Supreme Court of South Africa rejects a demand for assisted suicide. So Amy Hasbrook will talk about it in a few minutes,
Okay.
Just a few seconds.
Okay, thanks. Nearly 750 euthanasia in Canada in 2016. An article on the CT.
For only 9 months for most of
Six months for
months.
Most of Canada.
It's not for a full year. It's the first report for the first year, but for only 6 months of operation.
Right, exactly. An article on the CTV News website in December stated that 744 people had received a doctor's help to end their lives in 2016, not counting palliative sedations. And as we know, in Quebec, at least as of the first 6 months, there had been 263 terminal palliative sedations. This included an estimated 300 people in Quebec, where a similar law to the Federal Medical Assistance in Dying Bill came into effect in December of 2015. According to CTV News, their survey of provincial and territorial health ministries did not reveal the total number of requests for assisted suicide and euthanasia, nor the reason some applications were rejected.
It's important for both sides. People who are for assisted suicide and people against.
That there be
important.
enough information. There's
Yes.
not enough information being released, so how can we know?
It's important for the society, for the government, and the governance, because you need to have all the sociologic input to be able to rule and to make a good decision about this law.
Right, exactly.
Which is not yet done.
Right, exactly. There's been no federal guidance so far, and we're hoping the federal government will decide to collect a good amount of information, but that's still up in the air.
Yeah.
Since passage of Bill C-14 in June, Ontario leads the nation in the number of euthanasia administered at 180. Also, according to the CTV article, 154 procedures were performed in British Columbia, 63 were performed in Alberta, 18 were performed in Manitoba, 8 were performed in Saskatchewan. As of October 31st, 16 were performed in Nova Scotia, so we don't even know to the end of the year.
There is a lot of discrepancy between the dates of the report for different kind of reporting. I don't understand all of those things.
Right. 4 were performed in Newfoundland and Labrador. None were performed in Prince Edward Island or the Northwest Territories. In New Brunswick, the Yukon, and Nunavut did not release data. However, in the Yukon, local media have reported on 1 case. So, like we said, we don't have accurate and total information about this, and the media are just picking up what they can, and they don't even know why people are being refused and how many people have made the request and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and how many was a failure and so on and so on.
Right, exactly. CTV found that the rate of euthanasia is accelerating in some regions. For example, 1/3 of the euthanasia reported in October were performed in the last month of 2016. So that means 50 euthanasia were performed in Ontario in December of 2016.
If it's just continued that way, which is not, it's accelerating. It means 600 people dead just on Ontario.
Right, right. So that's a lot. That's a scary number.
Yep.
Okay, our next item. What does the inauguration of a new government in the United States mean for the struggle against assisted suicide and euthanasia? Today, a new government will take over in the United States with Donald Trump at its head.
We are sorry for all Americans.
Right, exactly. It's bad news for especially people with disabilities in the United States. Since most of the activity around assisted suicide takes place at the state level, the Republican Congress and administration won't have much to say in whether assisted suicide becomes legal in the US. And the reason for that is a 1997 Supreme Court decision that basically leaves it up to the states whether they want to have assisted suicide and euthanasia, but doesn't grant a federal right to it. The exception is in the District of Columbia, where Congress must approve the district's adoption of assisted suicide, and some Republicans have vowed to prevent the law from taking effect. So as you remember, last fall, we talked about the bill passing in Columbia by a vote of 11-2, but the Congress has to approve it before it can take effect, and some Republican lawmakers are going to oppose it. So we'll see what happens if
they do the good thing for the bad reason.
Right. If they're doing the right thing for the wrong reason. Where the Republican Congress and the Trump administration are likely to cause a great deal of harm is by repealing the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. And they did surveys of people and they asked about the Affordable Care Act, and people said, yeah, that's a great law. And then they asked about Obamacare, and the same people said, that's a terrible law. They didn't even know it was the same law.
Yeah, it's the same thing with assisted suicide. Okay,
when you call it assisted suicide,
it's kind of soft and you need it. But when you call it euthanasia, they say, oh no, I don't want euthanasia, but it's exactly the same thing.
Right. Right, exactly. Medical aid in dying, everybody says, oh, that's very nice, that's very sweet. But euthanasia and assisted suicide, nobody wants it. Last week the Senate voted to defund the Affordable Care Act, the first step toward repealing it. And that was done late at night, so not many people were awake when that happened. Repeal of the Affordable Care Act will remove important protections, services, and supports that people with disabilities need to live independently and with dignity. For example, under the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies cannot exclude, delay, or charge higher premiums to people with pre-existing medical conditions.
So everybody is equal.
Right. So people with disabilities obviously have a pre-existing medical condition. And before the Affordable Care Act passed, they could be refused health insurance entirely, or they could be charged extra premiums, or they could be
just
delayed and wait a long time before their coverage would start. But this law said that everybody would have to be equal, and the insurance companies couldn't do that anymore. But if it's repealed, it goes back to the way it was. Insurance companies were prohibited from imposing lifetime limits on benefits. So the insurance companies couldn't say, we'll pay up to $500,000 in insurance costs and then you're on your own.
Yeah, if you live, let's say 10 years on a cancer, and after 4 years there's no more money, but there is no more money for you for 6 years.
Right, right. Right, and it doesn't, it's to the end of your life. So no matter how long you live, if you have a heart condition and you have to take medications and you run out of medications after 3 years, well, that's too bad. You don't get any more payment for heart medications. Also, the ACA included Money Follows the Person projects, where Medicaid, which is the
Obamacare.
no, Medicaid is the state health insurance for people with severe disabilities. Okay. It funded initiatives to transition people with disabilities from long-term care facilities into community living. And that basically enabled a person who was living in an institution to take the funds that paid for the institution and have them pay for services in the community instead, so that the money would follow the person out into the community. So that's why it's called Money Follows the Person, because they're already getting services paid for in the institution, so they're just changing where the services are paid for. The community first choice option, also it's kind of similar, was a standalone program that enabled people to choose to live in the community with funds going toward in-home personal care services instead of institutional custodial care. So that's the same idea. If you became severely disabled, you could choose to live in the community instead of in an institution, and you'd get your personal assistance paid for.
Yeah, institutions are not for everybody. Some are made for it, some are not.
Right.
That's life.
Some people are happy in institutions, but most people with disabilities are not happy living in institutions. Accessibility standards for diagnostic medical equipment ensured that machines such as mammograms and MRIs would be accessible to and usable by people with disabilities. So, you know, even despite all the civil rights laws for people with disabilities and all the access requirements, oftentimes in hospitals, people with disabilities couldn't use the equipment, even the hospital tables. If you couldn't get out of your wheelchair and get up on the table, you couldn't be examined. So it guaranteed that the equipment, like the hospital tables and the MRIs and the mammograms, were accessible so people with disabilities could get diagnosed and not have to wait a long time for treatment of cancer and that kind of thing. Because that costs lives. If people don't get treatment right away, then they have less of a chance of recovering from cancer. Also, medical expansion under the Affordable Care Act enabled many people to benefit from health insurance without having to qualify for Social Security disability insurance. And that SSI and SSDI are very hard to qualify for. Oh, yeah. You have to be extremely disabled to qualify for it. So the Medicaid expansion enabled some people with disabilities to have health insurance. So even if they couldn't get the cash benefits from those programs, at least they could get health insurance that covered everything. So that was very helpful.
Yep, it is.
You know, it was. It is for a little while longer until they repealed the law.
Maybe it will live for 1 or 2 days more days.
Right. And finally, young adults could remain on their parents' medical insurance up to age 26. And that's important because the kind of jobs that young people have don't usually provide health insurance. And if a person works only part-time, they're not going to get health insurance. So it's important that they be able to stay on their parents' health insurance.
It's bizarre. USA is kind of the last country in the world who doesn't have any health insurance.
Right.
It's one of the most modern and the least advanced in society. Even UAE have health insurance for foreign people who work there.
Right, United Arab Emirates, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. The budget reconciliation process is being used to attack the Affordable Care Act. Budget reconciliation can only affect spending, revenue, and debt limits, and is not itself a repeal of the law. So the budget reconciliation process is where halfway through the year, the government has to look at the budget and see if they've overspent or underspent and make sure that the budget is coming in at the right amount, and they can move money around so they can take funds from one place and move them to another place. And so they can take funds from the Affordable Care Act and move them elsewhere. So they can't actually change the law, but they can take the funds away so that there's no money to pay for all those things.
This is the same
And that's
effect.
what they did. It has the same effect, but that's what they did. And the Congress will have to decide whether it wants to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act or simply to modify the law by removing provisions it doesn't like. The Republicans have not proposed any alternatives to the Affordable Care Act, but say they will come up with something better.
Yes, how we look at it, about it.
Right.
Yes, yes, yes.
They say they'll propose something by the end of next week, but they haven't come up with anything yet. And the Affordable Care Act took a long time to put together and was thoroughly studied. So it's sort of like the law, the medical aid and dying law here in Canada. It was put together very fast.
But in the same time, Trump will solve the conflict between Jew and Arab.
Right, exactly.
Same thing.
Right, in his fantasies. Okay, our next item, Mary Kills People, to premiere January 25th on Global TV.
And this is not a publicity.
Right. Global TV will present a 6-episode series called Mary Kills People beginning January 25th at 9 p.m. The series focuses on a fictional emergency room physician, Dr. Mary Harris, who euthanizes people in her off hours.
Death angel.
Right. So she's the star of the show. She's the center, the hero. But that's what she does, an angel of death.
For us, it's mainly an anti-hero.
Right, exactly. See, TVNDY is worried that celebrating a euthanasia doctor as the hero of the drama is meant to portray euthanasia as a desirable response to disability and terminal illness and is nothing short of propaganda. We are concerned that the program will fail to differentiate between people with disabilities and those with terminal illness, as often happens in public discussion of end-of-life care. We worry that this entertainment will fail to reflect on the socioeconomic vulnerability of people considering euthanasia and avoid public policy questions such as access to palliative care and home-based services to protect people with disabilities from being institutionalized. Those are all the things we're worried about. And it's basically, we're worried that this is going to be just like every other entertainment that has to do with assisted suicide and euthanasia, because all those things happen when there's, TV shows and movies about assisted suicide. Excuse me. Okay. We are also concerned about the better dead than disabled message that is so common in fictional portrayals of assisted suicide, such as Me Before You and $1 Million Baby. Okay, so we're hoping that people will watch the show and make their comments to Global TV about the show.
Yeah.
Not that we want people,
Get them.
not we want to increase the viewership, but we want them to be hit with comments about the show.
Comments and remove the show, please.
Right.
That's not the real life, and that's not a way to work.
Right. The Supreme Court in South Africa rejects a demand for assisted suicide. The South African Supreme Court ruled that a lower court judge was wrong in his 2015 judgment authorizing Robert Stranson Ford to have assisted suicide or euthanasia. According to the group Euthanasia Exposed, the court confirmed that this is really, and this is a quote, "This is really a matter for elected parliament and not judges to decide."
That's a good decision.
That's true. The court shouldn't be making that decision. The lower court decision by Judge Fabricius was made in haste and did not properly consider South African law, the international context, the country's social values, or the impact of the right to life. The medical information provided to the court was flawed and contradicted the real medical records.
Looks like Canada, except the decision was not the same.
Right, exactly. The real medical records, which were withheld until a court order was issued. The Supreme Court found that the case was manipulated by the euthanasia lobby groups Dignity South Africa, its lawyers, and the estate, and the medical records indicate Strachan-Ford was actually asking if he could back out of the euthanasia assisted suicide at the time of his death. So those are all the things that the Supreme Court said about the decision in the lower court when it rejected the idea of the assisted suicide, saying essentially that it had to go through the parliament to become law. Mr. Strachan-Ford died 2 hours before the lower court ruling was handed down. Thanks to EPC and Euthanasia Exposed for information for this news brief. So, if you want more information about the questions that the topics that we presented here, yes? Non, c'est OK. Je peux finir. For more information about the topics we discussed, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours-vivant, not dead yet. You can go to our website at tvndy.ca. You can email me at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christian for helping out.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks to you for being there.
And
we'll
Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year. See you
Bye.
next time.
Bye.
Bye.